Hi friends, today we'll create a simple web application using Entity Framework, Web API, AngularJs and Bootstrap. So let's get started. Let us create one project and give it a name of simple web application. Create an empty web application. Okay, our web application is created, and now we would require two more projects, one for Entity Framework and other for Web API. So now let us go and create Entity Framework. For that, go to /Windows and select class library. Let's give it a name of data access library and click on OK. So we don't require this class.cs file, let us delete it. And we would create one more project for our web API, that would be in /web ASP.NET web application. Let's give it a name of web API and click on OK. Select web API and click on OK. So if you see this your ASP.NET application page, that means your web API is configured correctly. And now we have all our three projects ready. Now let us go and configure it one by one. The data access library would be configured for Entity Framework. The web API, as the name suggest, would be configured for web API, and a simple web application project would be configured for AngularJs and Bootstrap. So let us start with data access library. Okay, for Entity Framework, let us go into View, Server Explorer to create our database. I already have this, so let me start afresh by deleting this. Okay, let us go into add connection, local DB version 11.0, and let employee DB and click on OK. Okay, our employee DB. Okay, let us go and add a new table. Give it a name of employee. We already have ID and ename, and let this be nvarchar 50. Okay, so in our employee table we have ID and ename, and for this ID let us configure the seeds. So right click on this and go to properties. In the properties, search for identity specification, open that and let this isIdentity be true, so that our identity seed is set to 1 and identity increment is set to 1. Okay, so now our table is created. Let us go into this update database and update the script. Update database. Okay, now the update is completed successfully. Let us again go into our server explorer, go to tables and refresh. Okay, we can see our employee table. Now let's go and add some data inside this. Let this employee name be Hemant, Jason, Bill and Jill. So we have created 4 employees in our employee table. So our employee configuration is over. Let us go into our solution explorer, go to data access library and right click on it and click on manage NuGet package. So we would be installing entity framework. Let us go and install this. Click on OK. I accept. Okay, 2 DLLs would be installed. If you can see, entity framework and entity framework.sql. Okay, so now let us go and add our context. So for that you need to go into data, ADO.NET entity data model. Let us give it a name of employee model and click on add. So we have already created a database with table employee, so we would be selecting entity framework designer from database and click on next. So this new connection would be local db / version 11.0 says employee db and the entity name is employee db entities and click on next. So let us see if we have a table. Yes, we have our employee table, and let the model namespace be employee db model. Click on finish. Okay, our context is ready. So employee model context, and inside that open this and see, copy this employee db entities. We would require that. Go to notepad. We would require this employee db entities in future. Okay, close this, close this. Now our entity is configured, and let us move to web API. In the web API we are interested in one file called as values controller, and we would rename this to employee so that it reflects our database table called employee controller. So I have renamed the values controller to employee controller, and you can see that it is inherited from API controller. So all our web API controllers would be inheriting from API controllers. Okay, so now one more file of interest is in the app_start. We have this web API config. Let us go and open this. So this specifies the route in our application. So how would our web API be accessed? We would have our base URL like http:/localhost: some port / this API, then the controller name and ID. So here ID is not compulsory. Okay, so let us now set this as startup project and run it. Okay, so as you can see, the localhost 3606 is running, and we need to specify our API. So /API, then the controller name. Our controller name is employee, and enter. Okay, so it is giving us an error called authorization has been denied for this request. Why is that so? Let us go into our employee controller and see. So I have opened the employee controller, and in the employee controller you can see that it is annotated with authorize. So currently we have not configured authorization, so let us stop this debugging and comment this out and again run it. So I'm creating this application on the fly so that we can review all the errors what we are getting and resolve it. Okay, so let us again start with API / our controller name, enter. So this URL would call the get method of our controller, and as you can see on your left hand side we have written value 1 and value 2 from our get method, which is getting reflected in our web page. Okay, so that means we are able to connect to our web API, and let us copy this URL which we would require in our future classes. So two things we have copied, the DB context name and the URL. Okay, so now let us configure this web API to retrieve the employee. So first let us go and stop it. Okay, so this get method would retrieve list of employees. Okay, so we are not able to retrieve this employee. Why is that so? Because we have not referenced our data access library. So go into projects, solution, and check the data access library, and okay. Okay, so now it is there. So using data access library, so we have this namespace and we get this employee. Okay, so now okay, we had copied the DB context, so copy this. We would require this inside our get method using employee DB entities. Equals new DB employees. Okay, what we would be returning, employee DB entities dot employees dot to list. So this method would retrieve a list of employees. Okay, so let us go and see if we are able to retrieve the employee again. So I am expecting an error over here. So let us again go into our API employee. So it would hit our get method and it would try to pull in the employee list. So let's see if we are able to get our employees, and if we get some error we will resolve it. Okay, I suppose we are getting an error called as no connection string name employee DB entities could be found in application config file. So it is saying that in our application config file it is not able to find this employee DB. So let us go into our app.config file. But if you see, our employee DB entities connection string is present. So why that method error we are getting is it is not present in our web API web.config. So let us copy it from our application config in our data access layer, go to web API and inside that web config and paste it. Before that we need to stop the debugging and paste it in our connection string. Okay, that is set. Now let us run it again. And again let us give API/employee. as you can see, we are able to retrieve the employee list. So that means our web API is able to talk to our entity framework. So now that we have configured the get method, let us go ahead and configure all the other methods. Let me close this, stop the debugging. Okay, now let's move to the second get method. So it is get int id. This get method retrieves the employee based on the id pass, and it would return an employee. So okay, so let us try to retrieve. Let me copy this section, and what we required is dot first or default e such that e dot employee id, so it's a lambda function I am creating, equal to the id which is being passed to the method. Simple. Okay, so get id is completed. So this is to retrieve the employee based on the id. Now the post method, this is an insert method. So whenever we want to insert our employee in the database, we would be using this post method. So API/employee, and what we would be passing to this would be an employee class. Okay, so again let us go and copy this and see what all changes we need to do. So posting. So for post we have employee context dot employees dot add, and we would pass in the employee object which is being passed to our method, and second step is to save changes. Okay, so the insert method is completed. Now the put method is update of an employee. So it's a two-step process. First we would retrieve the employee which has the id which is being passed, and then that object would be updated with this value and then saved into our database. So let's go ahead and implement the put method. What we need to do is just copy this, delete inside method. Okay, first we need to search, so that, and we would store it in a variable called employee. So employee db entities dot employee dot first dot default. So let us search for e dot employee id equals the id being passed. So now we have retrieved the employee. We would be changing the employee name. So let us go ahead and change the employee dot e name to whatever we have passed in our value dot. Okay, so this value should be an employee object, and we would retrieve the name from that and update our employee. And our context, so now that is an employee db context entities dot save changes. Okay, so this takes care of the put method, which is insert. And now let us go to the delete method. As the name specify, we just need to pass on the id of the employee which needs to be deleted, and then it would delete the employee. So this delete is also a two-step process. First search for the employee. So first search for the employee which has the id which is being passed, and what we need to do is employee db entities dot employees dot remove. So we would remove the employee. Okay, so when the employee is removed, go and save the changes. Okay, so this takes care of our web API. So we have completed entity framework and web API. Now let us go into our web application and configure AngularJS and Bootstrap. Okay, go to manage NuGet packages, go to browse and search for Angular and select the AngularJS core, click on install. Okay, so if you go and see, it has installed AngularJS, Angular minified version of this AngularJS called as angular.min.js and mocks. Okay, so this 2-3 files are updated. Now let us go and close all documents. Okay, so we would require one HTML file to show the employee on our web screen. So let us create one HTML file called index.html. Okay, I misspelled the name. Let us rename it to index.html. And we would require one JavaScript file called as script. Okay, so let us give a title to our HTML page, simple web application. And in the head section, let us import our two files, AngularJS and script.js. Okay, so let us now go and initialize the module which is required in our Angular. And first we configure the module and then we would configure the controller. So to get IntelliSense in your JavaScript file, what you need to do is copy this or drag and drop this AngularJS in our script file. So this would create a reference path for our IntelliSense. So now let us go and create a module. So how do we create a module in AngularJS? Is by creating a variable called as myapp equals angular dot module, and the name of our module is myapp, and square bracket. So why the square bracket is required? The square bracket means this module is getting initialized. Okay, so my app dot controller, let us give it a name of my main controller. And so when this controller is getting initialized, it would call a main controller function. So the name is, I have named it as same. So this function would be called where main controller equals function. Okay, so this function would require two parameters, dot scope and $scope and $http. So $scope is created, like it is required to create variables which can be passed to the web forms, and $http is required to access our service, web API service. So let us go and create a method called get all employees equal to function So what this get employee would do is just called a service http.get, and it would call our service. Okay, so in remember we have put the service URL in our notepad. Just copy it and create a variable called as URL equal to this path. So now we would be calling this URL inside our get method and dot then. So then is just a promise which would tell us that it would retrieve the data from this URL, and it has two methods inside it. What would happen when success occurs and what would happen when failure occurs. So let us create those two methods on success and on failure. Okay, so those are the two names of the method. Now let us implement those methods, and on failure, let me copy that. On failure is equal to function. Okay, so whenever there is a success, it would give us a response, and that response will tie up to one variable in our scope called as, let us name it as employees equal to, let us give it a short name in lowercase, and in response dot data. So we would retrieve all our data from our web API into this response dot data, and that we are assigning it to this scope dot employee, and this employee variable would be accessible in our web page. Okay, so now we have configured on success. Now let us go and configure on failure. So failure would have a reason as retrieved from the web API dot scope dot, let us give it a variable name of error and assign the reason part. Okay, so looks like that our Angular is configured. Now let us go into our index.html. So before going into our index.html, let us see the name of our module. So name of our module is my app, and name of our controller is main controller. So this we would require. In the body we would have ng-app. So this is our main app, which is the module name, and let us create one div with ng controller, ng dash controller name as main controller. And to show the employees, we would create a table. The first column would show the employee ID, and the second would show the employee name. Okay, so now tr td. Okay, so what is the variable which would have the employee detail? It is employees. So we need to create ng repeat. So this would iterate through all our employees. So employee in employees. So this employees is retrieved from the Angular, and employee dot id and employee dot ename. Okay, so now we are in a script file, and we have not called this get employee method. Let us go ahead and call that. Okay, and Let us run the application. Okay, so we are getting the error as data null. Okay, so what we need to do is, it is accepting JSON. So this our web API is giving us all the data in XML format. So what we need to convert it to JSON format. So that's why it is giving us an error as whatever is the acceptable values application/JSON. Okay, let us go and close this. Okay, so we need to go into our web API, into our web API config, and config dot formatters dot remove config dot formatters dot XML formatter. So we have removed the XML formatter, and let us copy and paste and add JSON formatter. Okay, so now let us go and run the application. Okay, so now what we are getting is no access control allow origin error. So we are getting, let us go and configure. So for that, what we need to do is first close the debugging. Let us go into manage new get package, go to browse. This is what we require, ASP.NET Web API course. Let us go and install it. Okay, it is installed. I accept. Okay, so now it is installed. Let us close the NuGet package, and in our reference you should see that you will have system.web.http.course. okay, and now let us go into our web API config, and just below that create a variable dot course equals new enable course attribute star okay, let us say system web course, and config dot enable course in course. Okay, so this should take care of that error, and let us run it. API/employee. Okay, so now we are getting our employees in JSON format. So our web API is configured properly. Now let us run our web application. Start new instance. Okay, and you can see that the employee is getting retrieved. So now we have configured entity framework, web API, angularJs. Now let us change the look and feel of this index.html. For that we would be using Bootstrap. So let us go and stop the debugging, make our web application a startup project, and go into that, right click, manage NuGet package, browse and search for Bootstrap. So it's a CSS and a JavaScript library from Twitter. So you can see by Twitter, and it is used for look and feel. Okay, so the installation of Bootstrap is successful. Let us close this NuGet package, the script file and web API config. Now we are interested only the index.html page. So whenever you are installing Bootstrap from NuGet packages, it would install files in two folders. One is the content and script. In this script file it would install the bootstrap.js, bootstrap min, and it requires jQuery, so as a dependency, even that is installed. So we are not interested in any of this JavaScript files, but we are interested in the boot.css file. So let us call this bootstrap in our index.html, and it's a simple library. Just what you need to do is get a class and class of container and table, just specify table. So by including just these two classes, let's go ahead and run the application and see how our application looks like. Okay, so this look and feel is bit okay. Let us have table slash border and table slash striped, and again run this. So the look and feel is okay, and close this, and that completes our simple web application using entity framework, web API, AngularJS and Bootstrap. Thanks for watching. Share your comments in the comment section and subscribe if you feel like this tutorial was helpful to you.